All right, everybody, welcome back. Today we're going deep into something pretty incredible, the world of microbes and climate change. And, the source material is, it's pretty intense, a scientific paper published, get this, across numerous journals at the same time.
Like an emergency bulletin.
Yeah, like an SOS, right, to the whole scientific community. So what's the deal?
Well, it's a call to action, basically. The paper urges immediate and large-scale deployment of solutions using microbes to fight climate change.
Okay, so not just about the science, we got to actually do something.
Exactly.
Fast. So let's jump into it. One of the first things the paper hits us with is this pretty alarming statistic, a 70 to 90% decline in coral reefs if global temperatures rise by just 1.5 degrees Celsius.
Yeah, it paints a devastating picture. Those vibrant ecosystems reduced to bleached skeletons, essentially.
And, we've all seen the pictures. It's, healthy coral versus bleached and dead coral. It's pretty stark.
It is. But the authors don't seem to be saying that we're just doomed. Like, there's a way to fight back, and it involves microbes.
Right. The paper really emphasizes how essential microbes are, not just to life in general, but to the planet's climate system.
Okay, so how so? I know microbes are everywhere, but how are they regulating the climate?
They drive something called biogeochemical cycles.
Biogeo what now?
Yeah, it's a mouthful. Think of it like this. Microbes are these tiny engines that drive these massive planetary processes, breaking down organic matter, cycling nutrients, like carbon and nitrogen. They even influence what our atmosphere is made of.
Okay, so they're already kind of running the show behind the scenes.
They are, very much so. And now scientists are saying we can enlist them even further in this fight against climate change.
Okay, but how? How do we get these little guys to, be on our team even more?
There's a whole range of strategies that the paper lays out, like capturing and storing carbon, cleaning up pollution.
So they're already doing a lot of the work. Oh, absolutely. But we can enhance their efforts, make them even more effective.
Okay, I like the sound of that.
Yeah.
So give me an example. How can we boost their climate-saving powers?
So there's something called the microbial carbon pump. And basically what happens is certain microbes in the ocean, they capture carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and store it deep in the ocean, like a natural carbon capture system.
Wow, that's amazing.
Isn't it? And the paper suggests that we can actually boost this process, like cultivating specific types of seaweed and marine microbes that are really good at carbon sequestration.
Okay, now that's starting to sound a bit more like a plan.
Oh,
but what else? What other microbial strategies does the paper talk about? There's this table 1 that keeps getting mentioned.
Yeah, table 1 is like the action plan. It lists 6 key strategies. There's carbon sequestration, which we just talked about, but also methane oxidation, bioenergy production, bioremediation, nitrogen management, and something called microbial therapies.
Microbial therapies.
Yeah.
That sounds kind of sci-fi.
Yeah.
What's that all about?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. It's basically about restoring damaged ecosystems and improving the health of organisms by, get this, manipulating their microbiomes.
Wait, so how everyone's talking about gut health and the microbiome?
Exactly. But it applies to way more than just our guts. Every organism has a microbiome, from humans to corals to trees.
Right, so we're talking about entire ecosystems getting like a microbial makeover.
That's a good way to put it. You see, climate change can really disrupt these delicate microbial communities. It throws things out of balance. And microbial therapies are about restoring that balance, like making an organism more resilient to stress, to the environmental stress.
Okay, so concrete example. What would that actually look like in the real world?
Imagine introducing beneficial microbes to a struggling coral reef. These microbes could help the corals fight off bleaching, resist diseases that are caused by rising ocean temperatures and acidification. Or think about engineering crops to be better at partnering with nitrogen-fixing bacteria.
So they wouldn't need as much fertilizer.
Exactly, which would be huge because synthetic fertilizers are a major contributor to, greenhouse gases.
Okay, this is all starting to come together. So we're not talking about like abstract theories here.
Yes.
There are real-world applications with potential for tangible benefits.
Absolutely. And the paper emphasizes that these solutions, they're not just theoretical. They're based on solid science and ready to be scaled up, implemented, put into action.
Okay, but this all sounds incredibly complex. And how do we even begin to coordinate something like this? on a global scale. That seems like a huge undertaking.
It is, and that's why the authors propose, well, a rather ambitious solution, a global science-based climate task force.
Ah, okay. So this is where the whole emergency bulletin vibe comes in, right?
Right. They're basically calling for a climate SWAT team.
Right.
And not just for research, but for funding, for policy changes, creating a framework for global collaboration and knowledge sharing.
Okay, I'm definitely intrigued. Let's dive into that next. How would this task force actually work? What are they recommending?
Well, they draw some interesting parallels to the global response to the COVID-19 pandemic, suggesting we need that same level of urgency, that same willingness to collaborate to really tackle the climate crisis.
Wow. Yeah, that's a powerful comparison.
Hmm?
I mean, we saw how quickly things can move when there's a global sense of urgency and everyone's willing to work together.
Exactly. So in the next part, let's unpack the specifics of this task force, the structure, the goals, and see how it could actually pave the way for a future powered by microbes.
All right, so this global task force, this climate SWAT team, it's a big idea, right?
Yeah.
But how would it actually work? What would it look like?
Well, the paper goes into the proposed structure, and they actually draw inspiration from some pretty successful collaborative efforts that we've seen.
Okay, like what kind of examples are we talking about?
Yeah. Well, think back to the COVID-19 pandemic. The rapid development of vaccines, treatments, all of that. That was a direct result of global collaboration, of scientific innovation, and frankly, a sense of urgency that really cut through a lot of red tape. And the authors are basically suggesting a similar approach, but for the climate crisis, harnessing that same energy, that same collaborative spirit.
So a kind of pandemic response model, but for climate change. But, I mean, wouldn't that require an immense amount of global coordination? How do you even begin to organize something like that?
It would, and that's why the task force is designed to be decentralized but globally coordinated. It takes into account, local needs, local regulations, while still maintaining this unified global vision, bringing together the best minds from all these different disciplines and making sure that scientific expertise is at the forefront of every decision that's made.
Okay, so we're talking scientists, policymakers, industry leaders, all working together under this sort of global umbrella. That's a pretty tall order.
It is. The paper really stresses the need to break down silos, to foster collaboration between all these different sectors. I mean, think of it like a giant think tank, constantly evaluating and refining these microbial solutions, adapting them to different regions, different contexts, and of course, making sure that ethical considerations are addressed every step of the way.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But who would actually run this task force, and where would the funding come from?
They propose this multi-tiered structure with representation from international scientific organizations, from government agencies, and private sector stakeholders as well. They even mention specific organizations like the International Society for Microbial Ecology, the American Society for Microbiology, drawing on their expertise. And as for funding, well, they emphasize the need for a substantial and sustained investment from both public and private sources, similar to the funding that was mobilized for pandemic research, for example.
It sounds like they're really trying to cover all the bases here, from the scientific expertise to the practical implementation, the funding. It's a big vision. But let's bring it back to the microbes themselves for a second. We've talked about all these broad strategies, carbon sequestration, bioremediation, and these fascinating microbial therapies. Can you give me some specific examples of what that might actually look like in action?
Absolutely. Imagine picture vast fields of seaweed cultivated offshore, absorbing massive amounts of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Or picture specially engineered bacteria deployed to clean up contaminated industrial sites, turning pollutants into harmless byproducts. It's pretty amazing stuff.
Okay, I'm starting to get a picture of what this microbial future could look like.
Yeah.
But what about the microbial therapies? Those still seem kind of mysterious to me. How do we actually manipulate the microbiomes of entire ecosystems?
Think of it like this. Just as we're learning to manipulate the human gut microbiome to improve our health, we can apply similar principles to other organisms, to ecosystems. Take coral reefs, for example. Scientists are already exploring ways to introduce beneficial microbes that can help corals resist bleaching, that's caused by those rising ocean temperatures. It's about giving these delicate ecosystems a microbial boost, helping them to thrive in this changing world.
So it's not about like replacing entire ecosystems, but more like giving them a helping hand to adapt and survive. But how would that work on a larger scale, say with forests or agricultural land?
There are fascinating possibilities there, too.
Yeah.
Imagine engineering crops to better partner with nitrogen-fixing bacteria. This could significantly reduce our reliance on synthetic fertilizers, which, as we know, are a major contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. Or think about using microbial therapies to enhance the health and resilience of forests, making them more resistant to drought, to pests, to diseases. There's so much potential.
That's incredible. But I have to ask, are there any risks involved in manipulating ecosystems on such a large scale? Couldn't we unintentionally create some kind of, ecological imbalance?
That's a valid concern, and the paper acknowledges that need for rigorous safety and ethical considerations. It's not about just blindly deploying microbial solutions without understanding the potential consequences, and that's where this task force comes in. They would play a key role in evaluating these risks, conducting thorough ecological assessments, and making sure that any intervention is done responsibly and sustainably.
Okay, so it's a balancing act, harnessing the power of microbes while also safeguarding the delicate balance of our ecosystems. It's exciting, but it's also a little bit daunting. What do you think is the biggest challenge facing the implementation of these microbial solutions?
Besides, the obvious scientific and logistical hurdles, I think one of the biggest challenges is going to be shifting our mindset. We've spent so long viewing microbes as the enemy, as germs to be eradicated.
Right, like we've been fighting a war against microbes for centuries, and now we're being asked to team up with them. That's a pretty big paradigm shift.
Exactly. And it's going to require a lot of public education, public engagement to really overcome these deeply ingrained perceptions. We need to start seeing microbes not just as threats, but as potential allies in the fight for a more sustainable future.
That's a great point. I mean, we've made such huge strides in understanding the human microbiome and its importance for our health. Maybe it's time to apply that same level of appreciation and understanding to the microbial world at large.
Absolutely. And that's where this paper is so valuable. It's not just about presenting the scientific findings. It's about sparking a broader conversation about the role of microbes in our world, in our future.
Okay, so we've covered the urgency, the potential solutions, the need for this global task force. But what about the everyday person listening to this? What can they do to contribute to this microbial revolution?
That's a great question. I think the first step is simply to stay informed, to stay engaged, learn about the research that's being done, support organizations that are working in this field, advocate for policies that prioritize these microbial solutions. And on a more personal level, we can all make choices that support a healthy microbiome, both within ourselves and in the environment.
So things like eating a diverse diet,
Right.
reducing our reliance on antibiotics, generally taking care of our planet's ecosystems.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that we're all interconnected with microbial world and our actions have a ripple effect.
Well said. This has been a truly insightful dive into the world of microbes and climate change. It's given me a whole new perspective on these tiny organisms and their potential to make a real difference.
It's a fascinating field and one that holds immense promise for the future.
I agree. It's amazing to think that something so small could hold the key to tackling one of the biggest challenges facing humanity.
It really is remarkable. And the more we learn about the microbial world, the more we realize just how much potential it holds. It's like we've only just begun to scratch the surface.
It's funny. We often think about climate change as this massive, overwhelming problem. And it is, but this paper, it offers like a glimmer of hope. It's like, okay, maybe we do have the tools to fight back, even if those tools come in the form of these tiny organisms that we can't even see.
It is a powerful reminder that nature often holds the solutions we're looking for. We just need to be open to learning from it, working with it.
Well said. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to circle back to something you mentioned earlier about the need for a paradigm shift in how we view microbes. How do we go from seeing them as the enemy to recognizing them as potential allies?
Well, it's going to require a real concerted effort on multiple fronts. I mean, we need to keep investing in research. We need to educate the public about the importance of microbes and foster more collaboration between the scientists and policymakers and industry leaders. It's about creating a culture where microbial literacy is valued, where we see the potential of these organisms to not just solve problems, but to create a more sustainable and resilient future.
It's almost like we need a microbial PR campaign, right?
Yeah.
Showcasing all the amazing things that they do for us, for the planet. I mean, beyond the climate benefits, microbes are essential for for everything: food production, waste decomposition, even our own health.
Exactly. And that's where storytelling comes in. We need to find compelling ways to communicate the wonder and the importance of the microbial world. Think about documentaries like Planet Earth, right? I mean, they've done an incredible job of showcasing the beauty and the complexity of the natural world. Imagine something similar but focused on the unseen world of microbes, the intricate relationships, the amazing adaptations, the sheer diversity of life that exists at this microscopic scale.
I love that idea. It's like revealing this whole hidden universe that's been right under our noses all along. And I think that's what's so exciting about this paper, about this conversation. It's a call to look deeper, to appreciate the interconnectedness of all living things, and to recognize that even the smallest organisms can have a profound impact.
Well said. And I think that's a great note to leave our listeners on, with a sense of wonder and a renewed appreciation for the power of the microbial world.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of microbes and climate change. We hope you've learned something new and that you'll continue to explore the incredible potential of these tiny but mighty organisms.
It's been a pleasure. And remember, the future is microscopic.